During the 1990s, the console wars were all about Sega versus Nintendo, at least for the first half of the decade, and then geared up to be a three-way face-off between Sega, Nintendo, and Sony. While Sony would dominate the home console business, the handheld war was still Nintendo with their all-dominating Game Boy versus Sega's Game Gear. History would tell us that the Game Boy thrashed the Game Gear, but that isn't exactly true. It was Pokémon that truly sent the Game Boy light years beyond the Game Gear, but that didn't release until 1996 in Japan, and later elsewhere. Today we'll be looking at a game that could be considered a big franchise release for the Game Gear, but we'll also look at why Sega's efforts would eventually lose out to Nintendo's. Panzer Dragoon Mini was a game from the series that was one of the big hitters on the Sega Saturn. Its playstyle is similar to Space Harrier and Star Fox in that it's an on-rail shooter where you fly about as a dragon, or on a dragon, I'm not quite sure, and shoot enemies that fly towards you or come along on ground level. The game is fairly short with only 5 stages and can be beaten in about half an hour. The last couple of levels do up the challenge, but only really when it comes to the boss fights. It's a shame that it's so short, as this is a sign as why Sega couldn't make the Game Gear survive when compared to the 30 hours you'd get out of Pokémon that released the same year on the Game Boy. That isn't a completely fair comparison because you do get shorter games on the Game Boy as well, but when you'd be in the video game store and the two games would be side by side on the shelf at a similar price, that comparison is justified. Both an advantage and disadvantage for the game is that you can hold down the fire button to lock on to multiple enemies at once. This meant that for the most part of the playtime, I simply held down the fire button and aimed at the enemies until they were all highlighted and then took them all out at once. This makes the game far too easy, as you only need to move the reticle over the enemies for a split second to lock onto them, and therefore you don't really need to aim and fire for the most part at all. Boss fights are all about dodging enemy fire and then rapidly firing at them. Occasionally a small enemy will also appear and then you need to just lock onto them and take them out before continuing the onslaught of firing at the boss. The graphics do occasionally give the illusion that you are changing direction, that you fly on the playfield, but it doesn't really change how the game plays. It is a nice effect though. The game is short, but thankfully, you do also get passwords so you can restart back at later levels. Even though it's short, it would be frustrating to have to start the whole game again just to get to the final level if you needed to attack it more than once to beat the game. Sega haven't shown a lot of love for Panzer Dragoon and the series in quite a long time. After 2 great games on the Saturn, it received its epic third in Panzer Dragoon Saga, before being dormant throughout the Dreamcast era and popping up again on the Xbox. It would then take some 20 odd years to get a remake of the original on modern platforms, but maybe it is time for a brand new entry. Maybe to get fans hyped up there should be a complete collection of the original trilogy, the later Panzer Dragoon Auto, but let's not forget this short but sweet Game Gear classic too. So that's just about going to wrap things up here on this review of Panzer Dragoon Mini. I'd really appreciate if you could smash that subscribe button here on youtube.com/@geekbattlegaming. You can get an article version of this review over at www.extremed.tv/gaming. And on the channel and on the website, you'll find loads of reviews and documentaries and articles about all manner of gaming things. We do have quite a big focus on retro gaming and modern retro gaming, and we've had a lot of reviews go up just recently. So until next time, make sure you stay safe, always stay extremed, and ciao for now. Boom, and we're off the air.